Hey guys, and welcome to the fourth episode of the crafting system. This episode will likely be a shorter episode. All I mainly plan on doing is setting up the display for the inventory portion of the crafting system, because what comes after that is going to be setting up the client side of the actual table where you can drag and drop items to that table, and I want to reserve an entire episode for that. So this episode is going to be a little bit shorter, but let's get right into it. So the first thing we're going to want to do is go to starter player scripts, client, go to the crafting client. And so there's going to be two different ways I'm going to do this, depending on whether or not you have the inventory system already. Because if you do have the inventory system already set up, then it makes the process of doing the display for the items a little bit simpler, because you already have the stack data that you can get from the inventory system. Like if you have a stack of rocks or something, right? You already have that stack set up and all that data is already stored, and you can get it from inventory client because we're on the client side, right? And so inventory client has this value right here, M data. But if you don't have the inventory system, you could still have a system for displaying items, but I'm going to do it in a different way that just directly looks at what items the player has and then displays them, and it's not going to stack. Because doing so, I mean, you could do so, but if you're going to add stacking, you may as well create an inventory system. So I'm going to show two different ways to do it. I'm going to start off with the without the inventory client, without the inventory system, and then I'm going to comment all that out and then show you how you do it with the inventory system. So feel free to skip ahead if you do have the inventory system. I'm not sure what time stamp that'll be. So we're going to need a new function. So we have this set window open. I'm going to put above here, I'm going to do updating display. If you did the inventory system, this is similar to the inventory's update display. Crafting client dot update. I'm going to call it inventory display, just because it's the inventory part of the crafting UI. First thing you're going to want to do is, so essentially what we're going to do for this, I guess I'll go over the concept first. So if we go to the crafting, just to make it visible and everything, right? We can make the UI visible. And so what we're going to do, we're going to look at this item scrolling frame, right? And we have this sample frame. At the start of the game, this is going to be toggled to be invisible, which is in here, item sample.visible equals false. So that's not going to show up. But what we're going to do is we're going to have the script look at every item that the player has, and then we're going to copy this, and then we're going to edit it as necessary. So this is going to be invisible, but then this one's still going to be here, right? And so that sample is going to be a template that we copy for each item in the player's inventory. And what we're going to do, what this function is going to do, is essentially it's going to be our refresh function. It's going to get rid of everything currently in there and then add everything in again. It's going to loop through all the items in your backpack, right? Because even if I run the game, I have all these items in my backpack, and if I hold an item, it actually moves it into my character. So we are going to want to account for that as well. You can see it moved into my character. But yeah, so we're going to use this to update what it shows in here. So, but before we can add those items in, we need to clear out whatever is currently there, so that way we can essentially refresh it, right? So I'm going to do a for loop. It's going to be pretty simple. Item F, this is going to be let's see, this is a text button, right? So for every text button, items SF get children to. So we want to make sure, first of all, that it's a text button, and then item F not equal to item sample. So what we're doing here, so this is a for loop. It's going to loop through everything inside of the item scrolling frame. So that's going to be this thing right here. So it's going to loop through all of the children, right? Which right now there's just 2. And what we're going to do is we're going to delete them, right? But we only want to delete some of them. We don't want to just delete everything inside of here, right? Because then we're going to delete the grid layout and we're going to delete the sample. We need the sample there so we can clone it. We need the UI grid layout so it actually shows up as a grid, right? But if we have a bunch of clones of the sample, we want to delete those clones, right? So how we filter that is we use this if statement, which says, okay, is the item's class name a text button? And as you can see, the class name of the sample is a text button. Where class name is. I don't know what class name is, I'm not gonna lie. Class name right here. So the class name is a text button. So all of the clones of this sample are going to be text buttons as well. But we also don't want to delete the sample, so we also make sure that the item we're looping through is not the item sample, which we already have a variable for up here, right? And then we just destroy that. So that's going to clear the display. So then the next thing we want to do is we want to find all the items. So let's see. We're going to define some character variables. So local backpack is equal to player, right? Or player find first child. Oops. Find first child backpack. If not backpack, then return end. And remember, the backpack is where the items, where the tools are stored. That's this thing right here. And another thing to note with this is every time you die and you respawn, it'll delete the backpack and then create it again. So the backpack is essentially going to line up with the characters respawning. So this might also, it might be nil, in which case we don't want to try updating the display if the backpack isn't there, right? Then local character equals player.character, and same thing here, if not character, then return end. If the character is nil, then that likely means you're like right in the middle of respawning. So we can just, ignore that input, and then it'll probably update later once you've finished respawning, right? So then, now we want to create a list of all the tools. Remember how I said, when you run the game, right? Most of your tools are going to go into the backpack right here, but not all of them necessarily. Because if you hold a tool, then it moves it into your character. And so we can't just do like backpack get children, right? We're going to have to specify also to get the tool from the character as well, if there is one. So we're going to create a new table. So finding tools list, local tools. It's going to be a table of tools, right? We're going to do for I, tool and target children do if tool.class name, then table.insert tools tool. So essentially we're going to loop through all the children in the character, because when you hold the tool it's going to be a child of the character. We don't know where it's going to be necessarily. We don't know what it's going to be called, so we can't just do like character dot something, right? You could, I'm realizing there's actually a better way to do this. Character find first child of class. I don't know why I didn't do this originally, but I'm going to do that. Because there's only really going to be one tool in your character. I mean, I guess maybe if something glitches out, you might have two, but if something glitches out, then something glitches out. It's not really going to happen in most cases. So there's going to be, so what we're doing here is we're creating a new table, and we're starting it off with one item in it, and that, actually we probably don't want to do it like this necessarily. So I would want to do like local held tool equals that. I'm going to put a question mark here because the issue with putting this directly in the table is that this might be nil. Because if there's not a tool, then it's going to be nil, right? So if held tool is not equal to, oh my gosh, nil, then table insert tools held tool. So if you have a tool in your character, then we want to insert that into this table. If not, we just ignore this, right? And then we want to loop through everything in the backpack. So we're going to do for I, tool and backpack get children do if tool.class name. If it's a tool, so just to make sure if you put anything other than a tool in your backpack, this makes sure that it doesn't count those. If you need it to count those, if you have like a custom inventory system thing you got going on, you can just get rid of that if statement. But I'm going to leave this like this. Then insert it into the list of tools, right? It's pretty simple. So now this tools table is going to be a table that has a list of every tool that the player has, right? Every item that the player has, which is perfect because then we can just loop through that table and create a clone of the sample for each item, right? Displaying tools. So for I, tool and tools do. So we're going to loop through every tool in the table, and we're just going to creating item frame, right? Local item f equals, oh my gosh, equal to item sample. We're going to create a clone of that item sample, right? The sample frame. We're going to change the name of it, just because why not? I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to affect the code, but it'll make so when you're looking at it in the Explorer, like if you're testing and you look at the UI in the Explorer, you can know what frame goes to what item. So it's kind of useful for things, I guess. Item frame dot image, which is, so we're going to do item frame dot image label dot image, right? That's going to be the image property of this. And we're going to set that equal to tool.textureID, which is essentially the image for the tool icon, or yeah, for the tool icon. And then we're going to do item f dot, it also has this item count text label, which is just how many items are in the stack. I'm just going to make that invisible because this version of displaying the items isn't going to include the stacking. So we can just not worry about that. And then display. So and then so there's one last step. So we've changed all the properties now. So we've changed, you know, the name of the frame. We've changed the image to match the image of the tool, and we've removed the item count text. If you wanted, you could also add like a text for like the name of the tool as well, and then you'd have to change that here as well. But I didn't add that. So, but there's two things you need to change after that in order to make the item actually visible, in order to make the frame actually visible. And one thing is you need to set the parent. And the reason for that is because whenever you run this clone function, it makes a clone of this item, but it doesn't set, it sets that the new item's parent property to be nil. Because, you know, usually when you're cloning something, you want to modify some properties, and then you're not ready for it to be actually displayed in the game until you've modified those properties. And so by default, it sets the parent property to nil, and then you can set it to whatever you want to when you're done, right? So we're going to set it to the same parent as the item sample, which is just going to be item scrolling frame, right? And you could also just do items scrolling frame, right? I usually like to do it like this, though, just in case I ever move the item sample somehow. If I ever like edit the UI and move it somewhere else, then it's just one last thing I have to update in the code. But and then the next thing you need to do is set the visible property to true, right? Because we have the script that's going to be setting this to false for the item sample, and so when we clone the item sample, the clone is also going to have visible set to false, so we want to make sure we set that to true. Okay, so this function is pretty much complete now. This should theoretically update the items, but we need to actually determine where we run this function now. So there's I guess one way we can do this is to just run this every time you open the inventory, which, you know, that works pretty well, right? So it'll just update whatever it shows every time you I guess not the inventory, sorry, every time you open the crafting menu. And that'll work for just showing that just seeing if it works, right? So if you add that line right there. Oh my gosh, why is my mouse lagging? Okay. And then it should, when I open it, looks like it's not quite working. Okay, update display. Let's see if it runs the function at all. That's usually the first thing you want to check. Okay, it does run the function, but it's not displaying the items. So another thing we could check. Okay, why is it frozen? Uh-oh. Well, that's not right. Okay, so that's clearly something we did wrong. So this is running pretty much indefinitely for some reason. So this tools table, there's something wrong with this tools table. I'm going to add a test. Oh, wait. Actually, I'm just going to comment this out for now. So this tools table, what's going on with this? That shouldn't be long enough of a table to cause issues. Yeah, it's definitely not that long of a table. Let's see. But it only did it the one time. I'm not sure why it... Maybe Studio was just bugging, I don't know. But, so I'm just going to pretend like that wasn't an issue. And hope that's not going to come up later. But, I'm going to add that back in. So another thing, what I was going to say before I froze for a second. Another thing we can check is if we go to players in the Explorer. So we're in testing. We go to the Explorer, go to players, and make sure you're in client mode for this. Go to player GUI, go to crafting, and you can essentially navigate to where the items should be, and we can see that the items aren't there. So it's not creating the frames at all. Or maybe it's creating them, but it's not putting them there. Or, there's various things that could be possible. We printed the tools table earlier, and it seemed like that had everything it needed to, but it's still not actually adding the frames. Okay, it's looping through everything. Oh, okay, it has the things in here now. I don't know why that changed. Unless I was looking in the wrong place before. Oh, I see what it is. I think I did this right the first time, but maybe I don't know. But this needs to be item sample.parent, not item sample. I think I might have messed it up when I edited it. But that should fix that. Cool. Okay, so you can see it shows all the items. The issue with only running the so we have this in the set window open, right? It only runs the update display function when you first open it. And if you open it, if you close and open again, it'll update, right? And you can see all the prints from that. But the issue is that if it's open and you lose an item, right? So if it's open and I were to go in here on the server side, right? Now we're to delete half these items, right? That's more than half, but whatever. It doesn't update to match. I mean, the inventory system does because I set it up to do so. But we also need this to update when things change in the inventory. That's something we're gonna set up real quick. And so what we're gonna do for that is we're gonna make use of the character added event, and I'll explain why. So let's see. So we're gonna create a new function on here, right? Right under the start function, we're gonna do character added, and this isn't going to be necessary for people with the inventory system as well, because the inventory system does this for you, and you can just connect with the inventory system whenever it updates. But if you don't have the inventory system, then this is how you do it. So crafting client dot character added character. So we have this function we created, and then we're going to connect that function. So player dot character added connect crafting client dot character added, and then if player dot characters, the player's already loaded in, right? Or if the player's character's already loaded in, then exactly whatever the AI said right there. Crafting client dot character added player character. So we're just going to run the function, right? Okay. So then in here, so this, I guess first of all, you're going to need to print character loaded, right? Whoa, character loaded. So that's going to run whenever the character loads into the game. Character loaded. If I restart, it should do the same thing. Character loaded, right? So we know this runs when it should. It defines some character variables. Some of these are going to be the same as before. With the backpack equals player weight for child backpack. And this time I'm doing a wait for child rather than a find for child. Find first child. Because when the character is first added, the backpack might not quite be loaded in yet. So we want to wait for it to be loaded in rather than just not working, right? Child added, connect, function, child. So what we're doing is we're connecting to the child added event. We're going to run a function with this child is going to be the child that was added, right? So basically, if anything's ever added to the backpack, it's going to run this function and it's going to provide whatever item was added as this child argument, right? So then we're going to do crafting client dot update inventory display, right? So if an item is added to the backpack, we update the display, right? Backpack dot child removed. Same sort of thing with this, just reverse. If an item is removed from the inventory, from the backpack, then we update the display. And then what we also want to do is character dot child added, right? So we already have the character variable from up here, right? Do a different section here. Connecting events. So if we do character dot child added connect, so when you hold an item, right? If you're holding an item and then that item is deleted, right? That would be the child removed, but we would want to deregister that item, right? Or if you get a new item and it's put in your character rather than your backpack, we would want to register that item, right? So Same sort of thing with the character. Except I'm going to add one little if statement just to help on processing power. We only want to do this for things that are tools, right? We don't want to run this function for when, you know, your character is just loading in and it loads in like the body parts or something, right? That's not going to impact the inventory. Crafting client.update inventory display, and then same thing to the child moved, connect function child if child pass name, crafting client.update inventory display. Cool. Now that is this function set up. So this should make so the inventory for the crafting system updates anytime there's changes in the backpack, right? So it'll update when you open the inventory or when you open the crafting system, and it'll update when things are added or removed. So if I go over and I pick these things up too, you can see it updates as I go. And it'll also update every time I open it, which, I mean, if you update as you go, you don't really need to update every time you open it, but it's just kind of a safety measure to have it like refresh every time you close and open it. But yeah. Okay, so now to finish the episode off, I'm going to show you how you would do essentially the same thing, but if you already have the inventory system. So if you haven't been following along, like if you skip to this point, because you already have the inventory system, we added a bunch of stuff. So we added this character added. You don't need to add this stuff. I'm going to comment this out because with the inventory system, you don't need this. So I'm going to comment all this out. And then we also added this function, update inventory display. You don't need most of this, but you will need this right here at the top. And so, because this is just gonna destroy all the items from here, so that way we can add the new ones after we've refreshed it, right, to show what's there currently rather than what was there before. So this is just deleting all those items, so that way we can add them back in again. And it's specifically filtering to only delete the text buttons that are not the sample item. And then we're running that function on the set window open function whenever you open the window, just as kind of a safety measure. But anyway, so that's all if you're working with the inventory system, that's all you need since we started doing this. And so then now, working with the inventory system, it changes up how we do this a little bit. So what we'll want to do, we need to get the inventory client, first of all. So we need to require that module. So we're going to go up here, local, I'll do it up here, I guess, or down here. Local inventory client equals require. And what we can do here, oh my gosh, require, in order to access inventory client, we're in the crafting client currently. So if we do script, that keyword is going to reference this object. So script.parent.inventory client will reference this module, which is perfect. So now we have the inventory client, and from the inventory client, we have this inventory data right here. That's going to have basically all the information we need in order to update the display. So down here, so update inventory display, and then I'm going to say, so looping through inventory data. We're going to do if not inventory data or inventory client.inv data. So if that value is nil, then we just want to have a little safety measure. No data is found in the inventory. Do a little warning message and then return, and then not run any of the code after this. A lot of these checks might be better off after or done before this clearing display thing. So like how it was before, I would like with this code right here, right? If you don't have an inventory system, I almost mentioned this before, but you might want to move this under here. Not under here, but just under here. Because if you return, so if you clear all the items and then you try to find the backpack and for some reason it's not there, and then you return, well, you've already cleared the items, so it's already going to show that there's nothing there. But if you do this way, then it's going to not run and then not actually clear the items until it finds the character in the backpack. I don't need this information here though, so I'm going to get rid of this again. And I'm going to move this underneath this return right here. Just because that seems smarter. And then we're going to say, so I want to change this, checking if inventory data exists. And then I'm going to do looping through inventory data for I, stack. And this is going to be types.stack data. So this types module, I used it in inventory system as well. Group types. So there's a stack data type right here, which has all these properties. That's what the inventory system is using. So we can just use that. Oh my gosh, there's so many comments. Right here. So in inventory client dot data dot inventory do. So we're going to loop through every stack in the inventory, and then we're going to say creating item frame, local item frame, and it's going to be the same as kind of without the inventory, except we have all the data in the stack object right here. So item sample, we're going to clone it, and we're going to do item f.name equals stack ID, rather than the name of the item, because the stack ID is actually going to be unique for each stack, whereas the name of the items might not necessarily be unique. Then we change the image label.image is equal to stack.image. We're going to change item f.item count text is equal to number of stack.items with a little x there. And the stack.items is just a list, it's just a table of every tool object in the stack. So the number of stack.items is just going to be how many items are in that stack, right? And then this is just concatenating it with a string just to make it look nice. Item f dot item count dot visible. So whether or not the item count, which is this little number here, is going to be visible, will be dependent on the condition stack.items is greater than 1. So if stack.items is greater than 1, then this is going to evaluate as true, and so visible is going to be set to true. If stack.items is less than or equal to 1, then this is going to evaluate as false, and then this is going to be set to false. So just a little shorthand notation. You don't have to use like an if statement, right? Then item f.parent equals item sample.parent. So this is the same as before. We're making it actually appear, right? And then item f.visible equals true. And that's pretty much everything. There is one other part we're going to add down here later on when we do the dragging and dropping, but that will be in the next episode. So I think for now, this function should run and update the data correctly. Yeah, so now we can see it shows the stacking and everything, right? Because it gets the information from the inventory system, but it only updates whenever we open it. It doesn't update whenever, like, if we get new items, it's not going to update, right? Then if we close it and open it again, it shows those new items, right? But we want it to update even when it's open, right? If we get new items. And luckily, there is a wonderful way to do that. And how we can do that is we can use, so in the crafting client, we have this signal module we required, right? And that's one of the ones you had to download, right? This one right here. And what's really nice about this is we can use that module. It has a bunch of functions in it. It's basically, it's using remote events and also like other things, like remote functions and whatnot, in order to send messages between client and server, but it's doing so in sort of a different syntactical way than using remote events on their own would. So it just makes it a little bit, you don't have to create a new remote event for every single thing that you want to do. You can just use the signal module and then just have a string key that you specify to link one thing to another. And I'll show you how that works. So what we're going to do, we have this inventory server, server script service, server, inventory server. In here, I guess before we get to there, let's go to the crafting client. We're going to create a new section up here. We're going to call it connecting signals, right? So signal listen. You could also do listen remote. I'm just going to do listen just in case you wanted to fire this from a client script as well. Because listen will listen to both the server and the client. That's one thing that remote events can't do, is because I've set it up to where if it's coming from the server, it'll listen through a remote event. If it's coming from the client, it'll listen just through like a function call or whatever. So we're going to listen, and we're going to specify the key as crafting client update inventory display. And so this is just a random string key. This can be anything. I've set it to this just because it kind of describes what it is that this is going to connect to. And then we specify the function we want it to run whenever this is fired, right? So crafting client.update inventory display. That's the function we want to run, right? And make sure you don't have parentheses here, because this is different than this. If you put the parentheses there, it runs the function, and then this value becomes whatever the function returns, which in this case is nil. It doesn't return anything. But this, without the parentheses, is the function object itself. So that's an important distinction there. So now that we've set up this thing, it's going to be listening for anything that fires with this key, and it's going to direct it to this function. So with that, we want to go over to where we want to actually fire it. So inventory server. Actually, instead of inventory server, I'm going to do inventory client, because inventory, we could do from inventory server, but in inventory server, right, we have this portion, we have a few portions, right, that do, where is it? That update the client, right here, the updating client, signal, fire, client, player, inventory update. We have this in a number of different locations. And so if we wanted to do it from the server, we'd have to run this from all those different locations, but for the crafting client as well. So we'd have 2 lines, so we'd be adding like 1 line for each of these functions, right? Rather than doing that, we can go to the client, wherever it actually receives that signal. This is where it receives the signal. And so we can just run something here. We can do signal.fire, and we're going to do crafting client update inventory display. And that'll basically handle all the cases for us. Although, I actually want to do this not in here, a better place to do this, because it's also going to update the inventory at the start of the game. So we essentially want this crafting client update inventory display function. We want this function to run anytime that the inventory's update inventory or update display function runs. So I guess a better place to put this would be down in update display. And we're going to just put it at the very bottom. So we're going to do updating crafting inventory. Bam. And that should connect everything. So now if I open the crafting inventory, right, and I'm walking around, I pick up some items, it updates already because it's just connected with the inventory system. And anytime that the inventory system updates, it will update the crafting system as well. Okay, that is going to be the end of this episode. Sorry we didn't cover a whole lot, but I wanted to kind of cover those 2 different cases just to help out. If you don't have the inventory system, you still should be able to make this crafting system, right? But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want access to tutorial files for any of my videos, or if you want access to one-on-one tutoring with me in like a voice chat where I can help you out with specific things you're working on, or give you a structured lesson, whatever it is you want. If you want one-on-one support, you can check out my YouTube and Patreon membership plans. But even if not, you're always welcome to go to join the Discord server linked in the description of most of my videos. And you can post questions you have there. You can interact with the community, etc., etc. But either way, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.